Hello everyone, and thanks for joining me for another watercolor tutorial. Today we're going to be painting these very simple layered flowers. They're simple, but they create a very beautiful effect, so let's just get right into it. So we are going to be using yellow, orange, and pinkish colors, and you can choose any set of these and water them down for the very first layer. So you're going to be including a lot of water and not so much pigment. So you want just enough to, allow you to see where you're painting. And I just used some yellow for the top portion of my flower petals, and I sort of went into orange and a little bit of pink. I varied it a little bit from flower to flower, which you can do the same, but just make sure that it's following the general shape of a flower as if you were looking at it from the side. You can even go ahead and add some green petals coming from the base of the flower. So as you can see, I painted the flower petals a little bit smaller towards the bottom of the flower so that the green petals could be accented. And once that layer is completely dry, and it really is important that your layers are completely dry, otherwise they will sort of smudge or bleed into the colors, the layers underneath, and you can see that happened in this first flower that I'm painting. So you can definitely speed up the drying with a hairdryer if you're impatient like I am. But for the second layer, we are using more pigment. You can actually either choose to use darker colors in general, or you can just use a lot more pigment and less water. And when you're painting on your second layer, you don't want to paint over the exact petals that you painted in your first layer. Otherwise, this sort of layered technique will be rendered useless. So you do want to just make sure that you're painting those petals in between, perhaps, the petals of the first layer, and even make them a little bit smaller. Once that layer is completely dry, we are going to paint on at least just one more layer probably, and this time I'm using considerably darker colors, so I'm using sort of a maroonish color, and I'm going to be adding some black to the center of it. So this portion you can actually keep a little bit wet instead of letting it dry completely. Otherwise, it's going to look very contrasting compared to the other layers. So this one can look a little bit more smudged, especially since we're going to be adding a little bit of black accent in the center of that. So here I'm adding a fourth layer. This one I wouldn't even consider it a layer because it's just painting on the layer underneath that is still wet, and for the reasons that I mentioned already earlier. But here you're just using darker color and then adding a few specks of black in the center just to make the colors of the flowers pop. So once those layers are drying, or you can just wait until they're completely dry if you are prone to smudging your watercolors, you can go ahead and start painting the stems of your flowers. And you're going to be painting these in one particular direction, making sure to follow a natural wave or curl, and this is just to make them look like they are sort of situated in a bouquet. And you can also begin to do the same thing with those green petals that you did with the flower petals, the colorful flower petals, in that you can paint on a second layer using the same color but just a lot more pigment and less water. Or you can go ahead and just use a darker color in general. You can also begin to paint on green petals onto the stems of your flowers as well. Again, this is going to be the first layer because once these completely dry, as they magically have in my painting video here, you're going to be painting on a darker second layer in exactly the same way that we did with the colored flower petals as well as the green flower petals underneath the flower head. As a final touch, you can sprinkle some green dots onto your painting and you are all finished. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. Don't forget to subscribe and I will see you in next week's video.